Hey everyone, this video is going to address just give you some reminders about week 4, and then I'll talk about what's going on in week 5. So there's a lot that's going on in this video, but I think sometimes these reminders can be helpful. In week 4, you're having conversations with your peers about your class project. So the reading for week 4 is about access and logistics, and your peer is going to read that. You're going to post some information about your project. That post is going to be due Tuesday of week 4, and I think that's January 31st. That's going to help your peer, and the reading is going to help your peer prepare some questions for you to help you make some decisions about what your project might do based on access. So, there's the kind of ideal project if money and time and access to participants was never an issue, but then there's the real world where we actually have to get things done. And I'm hoping that this conversation can help you make some of those decisions. The details about all this are in the week 4 folder, but again, sometimes I think these some reminders can be helpful. You're also going to develop, you're going to help your peer out as well. So you're going to read their post from Tuesday, and then you're going to also do that reading, and you're going to generate a list of questions. You'll have a conversation with your peer. I hope it goes well. I hope you have fun with it. And then you'll just do a quick write-up, summarizing your conversation, connecting things to what you read. Send that to your peer and copy me on it, and that's week 4. Week 4, you are also writing an annotated bibliography, so that wasn't all of week 4. You're also writing an annotated bibliography entry. Definitely use that annotated bibliography for your research journal. So there's a lot going on in the class right now, and I just kind of want to help you kind of keep things straight. So that was week 4. In week 5, we're going to talk about institutional review boards, and you're also going to go through the process of getting your human subjects research training. As I'm recording this video, I completed, I think, lesson 3 in the Department of Health and Human Services online training. Oh my God, it's a slog. I don't know if you guys are going that route, or if you just said, here's $50, make it easier for me. I've done both, and now I'm doing the Health and Human Services again, and it's a slog. So I hope it's going well for you. I hope that you're making your way through that stuff. I hope that there's some useful information in there. I wasn't aware of all the rule changes. I was aware of some, but I didn't know how extensive they were back in 2018. So that training is due at the end of week 5. But week 5 is about IRBs. And so I want to talk a little bit about IRBs and share my experience. I was a former member of Shawnee State University's Institutional Review Board. So I helped review some proposals. This is back 2016 to 2019. I think I served on the Institutional Review Board. So I have a little bit of experience, and I've also put through several proposals through our IRB. So I want to talk a little bit about IRB and our IRB specifically. And then I'll sum up with what we're doing in week 5. So I want to take you all first to the SSU IRB website. So this is the Shawnee State University IRB website. Actually, that's the training resources page. Here's the Institutional Review Board website. There's not a ton of detail on here, but there's a few important things that you should know about. So training resources, probably the first thing that you've taken a look at. I think I've linked that a few times in the class, but there's links to the different kinds of training that you can get to conduct human subjects research. So you choose one of these and then you go with it. I've usually done these that are for pay. I think I've done the city program, and these are good for 3 years. And right now I'm completing the HHS study, or the HHS training, which again, it's pretty sloggy. So you choose one of those, and you keep track of your participants, you keep track of your certificates and download those. They're with the Health and Human Services website. The way that they have their certificates set up, there's like 5 lessons, and you have to keep all 5 of those certificates, and I'll probably just put mine together in one PDF at some point. So that's the training stuff. You've probably already taken a look at that. Application information. So here's some pretty helpful stuff. In this class, by the end of the term, you will prepare an IRB proposal. And I'll show you where the prompts are for an IRB proposal. You're not going to actually submit it to IRB, but you're going to kind of get all the way up to, okay, this would be ready to send. So here are the 3 kinds of reviews that you can do. And so there are different proposals that you would complete for each of these kinds of reviews. So there's exempt, expedited, and then full. Most of the research in our discipline is going to be exempt or expedited. Most of the proposals I've submitted have been exempt, and I've had 1 or 2 that were expedited, and they were expedited because they involved a risk of privacy breach, because we needed to share information with other people on campus, or it was an issue of we were working with minors, and so an expedited was required in that instance. So a little bit of information about the different kinds of applications, and then when you're ready to actually take a look at the applications, they have the PDFs that have the prompts that have the questions for the application, and then the actual application itself is a DocuSign form. So again, you're not going to prepare and submit to IRB your proposal. You're going to answer all the questions as if you were getting ready to. So you would take a look at the PDF, and this is the exempt review application. There's questions about who's conducting the study, what kind of research is it, where is it being done, and in order to have an expedited research that you should have, it should be one of these cases here. So you choose what works, what's most accurate for your project. Talk a little bit about who your participants are going to be, how you're going to recruit those participants. Talk about benefits. Talk about risks, and if there are any of these issues here, then you're probably not working with an expedited or an exempt project you're working on, so that's probably going to be expedited. And then we're getting towards the end, and we have consent forms. If you're using consent forms, those need to be included. There's also a research summary where you need to write up a summary of your project. Assent forms, those are different than consent forms. So a consent form is for research participants, but if somebody is not of age or they don't have the mental capacity to provide consent, you can prepare what's called a consent form for their caregiver or their parent, and then an assent form for the person that you're trying to recruit. So for children, it would be a consent form for the parents and an assent form for the child. Any advertisements, if you're trying to recruit folks, you would want to include those as well. So you have all these additional information should be included along with your IRB application. Human subjects research training, any survey protocols, interview protocols, however you're going about doing your study, anything that you've prepared for that study, you would want to include it along with your IRB application. So you can also take a look at what's involved with an expedited review, but again, most of the research that's done in our discipline, unless you're working with folks that are under the age of 18, it's going to be exempt. Information about the different kinds of IRB review. There's a decision tree in there that will help you. And then they also have samples of consent forms and assent forms. So there's just a few notes that I wanted to share with you all about IRB applications. As I think I mentioned, I'm a former IRB reviewer, and I put together several IRB applications in my career so far. So a few things that I've kind of learned being on both sides of somebody that's reviewed and somebody that has put together IRB proposals. One, when you involve minors in an IRB project or in a research project, they get special consideration. And so we look at those pretty closely to make sure that their rights are protected, to make sure that they understand the study, that they're presented with information that in language that they understand, that they know what the study is, and they know that they can opt out of it at any time. So we really look at that. We look a lot, pretty closely at the language that folks use. So if you're using a lot of jargon, if you're borrowing information from, or language from Nancy Summers, article about revision strategies of student writers and experienced adult writers, you're going to want to cut that out. I'd say that you probably want to cut that even in a consent form for a parent. They probably aren't going to get that. So you need to put it in language that they understand. It doesn't mean that you dumb it down. It doesn't mean that you cut things out necessarily, but you need to put it in a way that that person that you're trying to seek consent from, that they can understand it, that it's not obfuscated, that it's clear, like this is what the study is and this is what their rights are. So if a study involves a minor, like there's special attention that's paid to it. So know that. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that the IRBs pay pretty close attention to that. If you're working on a class project, and just a class project, it's not something that you're going to share, it's not something you're going to present, then you do not need IRB approval. So if you're doing something for one of the classes in the graduate program and you just want to conduct that study for that class, you do not need to receive IRB approval. But whenever you take that data on the road and you share that information, or you put together a presentation like your thesis presentation, then you need IRB approval. So, and you need IRB approval before you do anything. You can't collect consent forms. You can't start conducting interviews or start collecting survey data until you received your IRB approval. You can pilot things, but you can't use that pilot data in your study until after. You can't use pilot data. You can only use data after IRB has approved it. Privacy is probably the one issue that for projects in our discipline we have to think a bit about. So the names of participants, how are you going to store their information? How are you, the consent form that you might have, is that the link that somebody could use to identify those people? If that's the case, how are you going to store those consent forms? What are you going to do with them after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? Are you going to burn them? Whatever. That is something we kind of take a look at. Like, is the privacy of the people that are involved in your study, is it something that you're thinking about in your IRB proposal? I mentioned consent and assent forms. Again, putting it in language that folks understand. That's a super important thing for research. It's just good ethical stuff to make sure that participants know what it is they're getting into, and that they know that they have rights and that they can get out of a study if they want to. An issue that's really kind of important, especially for some of you and some of the projects that you're thinking about, is, if you're working with students that are either at your school or in your classroom, there are some special things that you need to pay attention to. There are issues of authority and power that you need to consider. You need to think about whether students are being unduly influenced to be a part of your study. They might think that they're going to get a higher grade if they participate. They might fear that they will get a lower grade if they don't participate. How are we going to mitigate some of those issues? That's all stuff that we can talk about. It can be done. You can do research in your own class, but you have to think through those things very carefully, and you have to put together an IRB proposal that acknowledges those potential risks and demonstrates that you've thought through how you might address them. The final thing that I'll say about IRB proposals, at least in my experience, I haven't been on the IRB for I think 4 or 5 years now, but we do talk about the quality of research. So we might say like, oh, okay, that's an interesting project that they're working on, or well, I really don't understand the methodology. But when it gets down to it, our job is not to approve research. Our job is to approve your handling of human subjects in your research. So if your human subjects are being protected, they're able to provide consent, they understand the risks of their study, you might have a jacked up research project, but as long as you're taking care of your participants, that IRB should not say you can't do your study. You might get, in my experience, we have provided feedback to folks saying, you meet the requirements, you have the consent forms and you've explained your study, and it seems like you're protecting human subjects, but we have methodological questions that we wanted to share with you. So you can get approved to conduct your study, but you can still get feedback saying the research is kind of fuzzy here. The research methodology is kind of fuzzy here. In my experience, that has happened when faculty mentors have kind of checked out a little bit. And I can promise you in our program, that ain't going to happen. So if you work with me on a study that's going to go to IRB, it ain't going to go unless I say it's ready. And that means that you've addressed about, all of the issues that you will need to address in order to get, you're gonna do well with IRB once I sign off on it. Same goes for Dr. Knutson, and same goes for Dr. Jen Scott. So you will get feedback about your research, or you might, but really the task of the IRB is to make sure that human subjects are protected in the research process. So this week, you're just doing a couple of things. You're more than a couple. You're doing 2 or 3 things. You're reading the section in Blakesley and Fleischer that talks about institutional review boards. They got really good advice in there, and I highly recommend it to you. So that's pages 67 to 76 in Blakesley and Fleischer. You're also completing your human subjects research, and I cut the reading down a fair bit this week because I know that it's a slog to complete that human subjects research training. But get that in. Email that to me, and you'll get credit for doing that. I've also posted a sample human subjects research proposal, and a sample IRB proposal, and it's going to be on perusal. And I'd like you to comment on it. I purposefully goofed up some things, and I want to see if you guys can catch it. There's some ethical things in there that are kind of subtle, but they're things that I think that y'all will catch. So these are things, and the foibles that I've committed in that IRB proposal are things that I've actually seen in IRB proposals, like things that I've actually seen as a reviewer for the Institutional Review Board. So a few things going on this week. We're kind of gearing up towards that midterm project, so I hope the research is going well. If it's not, now's a really good opportunity to reach out to me and to get some help if you need it. But that's it for now, and I'll talk to y'all soon.